Well, I think it is extremely mysterious. That kind of sums it up. There's a lot of people out there right now who are speculating. The conspiracies, of course, are coming out. Here's what we have. I mean, first off, this gentleman, Patriot, Major General, Air Force. If you look at his credentials, a lot of people pointed out. I don't think you could have a more senior person in so many aspects of research and development, special programs within the Pentagon. And if you were to say, hey, who could I talk to who might know secrets about UFOs and crash retrievals? As Ross Coulthart pointed out, this guy's the top of the list, right? So when someone like that goes missing, and you pair it with the timing, which is what a lot of people are pointing out, the timing of President Trump's announcement that he's going to start releasing UFO files, that's what makes it suspicious. Now, in itself, we'll say none of that. And you just had this older gentleman, and he goes missing. They put out a silver alert. You still might get some resources like Sheriff's Department, obviously, and search and rescue teams out looking for him. But one of the questions people are bringing up is, okay, well, why all the federal agencies? Why have we got the Air Force Special Investigations? Why do we have the FBI? And that can be explained really simply. When somebody has top secret SCI, compartmented security clearances for that many years, you have a lot of knowledge in your head. You have a lot of things that we don't want foreign adversaries to have. And so you're kind of looking, I call it playing offense and defense. If someone like that goes missing, we're not only worried about did they voluntarily leave and go meet up with somebody to transfer information that's classified and they shouldn't, but we're also worried about the defense. Did somebody take them, right? Someone who wanted that information. And so that's where we can get into all the details of the mystery of how he disappeared.
So like you said, Ross Coulthart described the general, and I'll use his words, as someone who had served at the highest levels of the Air Force and defense world with oversight of classified aerospace and special programs. And Ross was saying that this should be treated a lot less like a local disappearance and something far bigger and should have far more headlines. Do you think the response is appropriate?
Well, as far as two things, right? You got the media response, which we're caught in this media cycle where I don't know if you could have many more things going on. So it's kind of hard to squeeze in another story that people are going to follow detail. But the other response from the different agencies and who's involved, I do think it is appropriate. And he makes a great point there. UFOs aside, right? If you had just been the director, he was the director of research and development at Wright-Patterson, right? All of the space weapons and projects that he was working on, special access programs within the Pentagon. He's a director over special programs. All of that, it doesn't matter if you left last month or 10, 15 years ago. A lot of that technology is still highly classified. So each one of those agencies are going to want to know, is there a motive here from him? Is he purposely going out? Take for example, the fact that he left his phone and his watch. Okay, these are deliberate, in my mind, deliberate things. Who of us leaves the house without our phone, knowing that you're going to be gone for more than like 10 minutes, right?
Even
we
then.
depend on that, right? We'll turn around and go back and drive. I will drive a half an hour to go back to my house if I know I'm going to be without my phone for the day, right? So he's an avid cyclist, a runner. I don't know if he normally carries his phone, but I'd imagine so. Right? You can be out there and something could happen. You twist an ankle, whatever. You got to pay for something with your phone or watch. So the fact that he left it there, and that we could go down a whole other road of speculation here because don't judge me here getting into the mind of a criminal, but if you're going to commit a crime, right, you don't turn your phone off. Right, for tracking, you leave it at the house, right, for you future criminals out there. Because you want to show that there was nothing out of the ordinary, that the phone, it could be tracked by cell phone pings and everything historically later. It could show where it was. If you're concerned about the phone being used as, wiretapping where it could be activated and you could hear what's going on. So let's say I have a secret meeting with somebody and I want to leave my phone at home. That's another thing that you could do, you know. And then finally, well, related to the tracking, there are people who, in the secret squirrel world, you're called to a meeting or you've got to deploy overseas. You do not bring your personal phone. You leave that there at home. Everything that identifies you if you're traveling undercover, you leave all of that at home, and then you get a burner phone. You get a phone and new credentials and everything. So, but the problem with that theory is that even though there's a lot you have to keep from your spouse who doesn't have that access, you would at least going to tell your spouse, I'm gone for work. And you might be able to, you know, I can't tell you where I'm going, but I'm leaving my phone and stuff here. Usually there's a third-party emergency number. You can get a hold of them if you have to, right? So if you're we're trying to guess why that would happen, I just find at the very least it's very suspicious that someone would just leave their phone. I would not leave my phone unless I was like, hey, the garbage man's coming. I got to take the garbage out.
Let's go to the issue of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the significance of his connection to it, and why in the UFO community this is everything.
So yeah, for those who aren't as well versed into this, and I've been looking at it since I was a kid, a little nerd, 8 years old or so. The lore, I call it lore, but that is now backed up by plenty of evidence that what happened, the 1947 Roswell crash. Shortly after that, we're talking within months, we had several things established. We had the NSA, the beginnings, the CIA, the Air Force was created. It was the Army Air Force before then. And Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio became the center, the headquarters for the new Air Force. And when the Roswell 1947 crash happened, we have plenty of evidence of the pilots who actually flew the debris, picked it up. Now, you can debate all day long about whether it was man-made, foreign, or extraterrestrial, but we know where it went and where it stopped, Texas, and then part of it went one way and part of it we definitely know went to Wright-Patterson because that was home of the Foreign Technology Division, or at the time I believe it was called the Air Material Command. I don't know if Foreign Technology was around until a little bit later. This is where you took everything that crashed. If you had a Russian or Chinese craft, anything, you bring it there, we back engineer it, we try to figure out how it works. Then later, a couple of years later, in the 50s was when Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official investigation into UFOs, was headquartered, right? Then you had the research and development, which is headquartered there still. So just about everything that the Air Force does with technology testing, back engineering, all of that happens at Wright-Patterson. So he was, as I understand it, he was the director of research and development, there at Wright-Patterson, and also represented, I believe it was Phillips or one of the contractors, who's in charge of all the programs there, with their development. So a lot of things that he was privy to. As a side note, my own grandfather went there on temporary duty assignments in the 60s. And when he would leave, he would tell my grandma, he's like, hey, can't tell you where I'm going. They're going to come pick me up in a car, and he'd be gone for 1 to 2 weeks. He was working underground. There's an extensive underground system of hangars and tunnels that they still deny to this day, which is kind of funny. When he was dying of cancer, he came to my father because my father's pretty upset. He's like, when you go on these assignments, you're gone for weeks. We can't get a hold of you by phone. And where are you? And he told him, not everywhere I work has a phone because I've been underground. So it was very frustrating to my father. Didn't know when he'd come home. But it's another story for another day. But we feel like we connected him to possibly some of these UFO alleged crashes that took place where they would then take the debris because we have witnesses who said, yes, that stuff went to Wright-Patterson. So
And you have a timing that connects him?
a timeline, you said?
Like, do you have a timeline that connects your grandfather to these particular?
He didn't keep an extensive journal, but my father remembers things like he didn't show up. He was out of town for like a really important basketball game that my dad had, and he really wanted him to be there. And my dad has this impeccable, memory for dates and things. And so we lined that up like, oh, wow, that was the week of the Kecksburg UFO crash in the 1960s. And there are witnesses who said they brought that debris to the backfield, and Grandpa gets a call the next morning, get on a plane, come out here, right? And he had told my father that he was basically at 12, 13 years old, he was to be in charge when he was gone because he was part of a team, he said, that had to be called at a moment's notice. So, I mean, we love to speculate. Yeah, I love Grandpa that on his deathbed, I wish he would have divulged something to us, but at the end of it, he did say we're not alone and don't be afraid. So to answer the question, Wright-Patterson is kind of ground zero for all research development, very key to the Roswell, and every crash retrieval pretty much that, followed for decades would have had some involvement there.
So General McCasland, as head of research, would have known pretty much everything. Or do they have silos even within that, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base program?
I think absolutely. It's very compartmentalized. When my grandpa worked there, he only talked to people by he only knew their first names. And what they would do is they'd bring people in across the country from different parts. Instead of just using their own talent and employees, they're on base because they didn't want them talking, when this was all over. So he worked alone quite often. He would come in for a few weeks, do his thing. He would leave, and then you wouldn't know how to contact each other. You were encouraged not to really associate with others. Now, somebody such as the general here, who was the director, I would think, and it depends on the years that he served and what was going on, but you got to know not only what's currently on your base and what secrets need to be protected, but also what came before you, right? You got to, I believe, got to know some of that. So it's all speculation, and that's why his wife, Susan, I think, was trying to put the kibosh on some of this. But let's face it, and Ross makes a great point, some others do too, that's not something you're going to tell your spouse anyways. Things that I worked on, the details of which I could be general and say, hey, we're working on an international kidnapping case. But your spouse is not going to get to know or shouldn't know any of the details that the normal public does not. And so that's what baffles me, is like, that's great, and I feel really bad for her and her family. But at the end of the day, we just don't know what he knew, and if that has anything to do with the disappearance.
Yeah, there will be a lot of people watching this right now who know everything about Wright-Patterson, about Project Blue Book. They know all about General McCasland. There'll be people who are listening who don't. So what are some of the prevailing theories right now from those who do follow the general and his body of work as to what might have happened to him?
Well, I think his wife addressed some of that on Facebook, where it was probably getting to her and the family because the rumors have gone rampant. But one of them, I guess, to the disappearance was, did he suffer from dementia? And she pretty quickly said he did not. He had a medical condition. They don't say what, but it was not dementia or Alzheimer's. He was of sound mind. I think Ross Coulthart also has a lot of people who know him, and his running group that he's a part of, he's very sharp. He's very active. He just did a 60-mile bike ride, I think, not too long before he disappeared. So that not being a factor, okay, then why would somebody of sound mind wander away from the house? And I think the prime theories are, one, he was going to meet somebody. Maybe he didn't expect that he wouldn't return. Or two, he was taken, right? And so by force. And that's why Sheriff's Department, I believe was the agency that did it, just recently put out a call to everybody, I think over 500 or so different citizens in that neighborhood, asking them to please voluntarily turn over their footage from any cameras that they have, Ring cameras, house surveillance cameras, because we don't, at this point, at least the public, from what I've seen, we don't even know if he wandered out the door on foot or if a car picked him. Well, and maybe let's just say it was Russian intelligence, right, or Chinese or North Korean, whatever country adversary you want to insert there. If they were wanting, they're watching the news as well, and they probably have more information than we do about these rumors that Trump was going to release files of something of the UFOs. So if they too are involved in this game, if you want to call it that, and people believe there is a race for technology going on, why is it not been, if multiple countries are privy to an alien intelligence or back engineering, why haven't one of them come forward and just done it, right, and disclosed it? And there's this idea that maybe we're at a stalemate, and that because of the implications of how this might go down for society or other reasons, that no one themselves has done it yet. And if they believe that Trump is now at the point where he wants to do that, so the theory goes, right, that they want to be up and have the upper hand, right? They either want to stall that, they want to slow it down or prevent it from happening at all. And so let's say that this general was on that short list of people who may have been slated to come forward. Then you go and pick him up and nab him and do whatever to get the information, or just keep him back, or, heaven forbid, something worse. Right? So that's one of the theories.
Would we not know that by now? And I only say that because if, Donald Trump had planned some kind of very fulsome disclosure, and it seems that he had something up his sleeve, wouldn't we already know if General McCasland was part of all of that?
Not necessarily. A lot of the legislation, if people have been following it, there were, in the National Defense Authorization Act, the last one, they gutted it and took out this whistleblower protection, right? And I think if that's the route that Trump wants to go, he wants it to be more than just an executive order. A lot of people may not trust that, right? They want it codified in an act of Congress so that it becomes law, so that they get protections. So let's say he was holding back. Let's say he had a lot to say, and maybe he was waiting for the right time where he at least had those protections in place. And that's one of the other rumors, is that he was going to do this under Hillary Clinton's prospective presidency, when she was thought to be the one that would be the next president. That this discussion with Podesta is, they were gearing up. Podesta, of course, was their guy in the street, to go and push forward the disclosure. And so they were hoping perhaps that was going to take place in her presidency. And when it didn't, maybe he got kind of shelved for a moment. He's like, well, I still need the president's backing. I still need these assurances, for my safety and everything else. And so we wouldn't necessarily know what he knows yet. I mean, that, again, I'm just repeating what people are saying, but we have to look at each of these with some open-mindedness.
But don't we think it's odd that as many men and women like your grandfather had these secrets and took them to their deathbed, that they didn't package them up and put them in a safety deposit box for someone at some point? I just find it so strange that over the decades, the number of people who would have been exposed to these secrets, that somebody hasn't told his grandson.
Well, they have. A lot have. I've talked to a lot of them that have. But you're right. We almost tore his house apart, and we're still looking for things. Maybe he hid it somewhere. Was this secluded? It can drive you crazy. But we had a different time period then, too. You remember that what we call patriots today is a little bit different than what patriots were like then. They trusted their government a whole lot more than we do, if you look at the surveys. Right? And even if you were asked to do something you didn't believe in, you at least believe that your government in the long term, or the high level perspective, knows what it's doing. And you would keep your oaths, to your deathbed. And I think my grandfather was one of those men, but I have a lot more examples of people who did let it slip at the end. And they said, forget it. I need to tell my son, as I'm lying here, not only did I work on these projects, but here's some details of what we know. If people want to look up Black Mac Magruder, you can look that up. Mark Magruder was his son, and he was a colonel in the Air Force, which, well, in World War II, it wasn't the Air Force, but he flew for the Marines. And anyways, his second career, when he left, was to go back, and they consulted with him on the problem that they had with the crash retrievals, the bodies, the craft that they had at Wright-Patterson. And on his deathbed, he spilled it, pretty much everything that he could for his kids, and they're like writing it all down, you know? So it does happen, but I think we will see more and more of that coming forward, that some of them are just waiting for the right time, and they're wanting to make sure that canary in the mine is still singing, you know, what's happening to other people before I come out.